Hello once again, everybody. I'm your host, Johnathon Robson, and welcome to the C-Bus Paranormal Paracast. This is episode 3 entitled Ghost Tech, Part 2. Last month, we took a pretty hard look at some of the most popular communication devices used by paranormal investigators. On this episode, we'll be reviewing various video and camera devices. As I stated on Part 1, we won't be able to cover every piece of equipment on these 2 episodes. However, it is entirely possible that the items that we don't cover will likely be discussed on future editions of the Paracast. I know that I likely ruffled some feathers on our last episode, but that was also by design. The paranormal community will never be able to grow unless it learns from its mistakes. We need less people trying to become paranormal celebrities, and we need more people focused on actual paranormal research. Investigators need to listen to critical thinkers and even skeptics. We need to be receptive of the viewpoints of these individuals and also take it into account for our own research. Otherwise, we're all doomed to keep repeating the same mistakes we've made over and over again. I don't expect everyone to agree with all of our viewpoints, but I do hope that our listeners can take and learn something from these episodes. We won't be sugarcoating our opinions, and we will call things like we see it. While this is a theory-based field, sometimes theories just don't hold up well to proper research, science, and common sense. My overall goal is to get paranormal investigators thinking about what they're doing. We will never fully agree on everything, but we should certainly be opening up these types of discussions with one another. We need to get away from the present way of thinking, and we need to be questioning everything that comes before us. Just because a device or person appears on television doesn't mean that they're legit. Let's start taking the entertainment part out of this field and try to bring critical thinking back to the forefront. Before we get into today's topic, I do also want to take some time to talk about the recent hidden Marietta Paranormal Exposition that we were a part of in January. First off, I'd like to give major props to the hidden Marietta team for making the convention happen, and also for the amount of time and dedication it obviously required to make the event go off without a hitch. Despite the 1 or 2 wise asses on our feed asking where this hidden event was, 500 people seemed to locate it just fine through Google and our plethora of advertisements before the day of the event. There are also a lot of moving parts to an event such as this, and they absolutely did a great job of putting the event together. Something tells me that there's a good chance that we might return to Marietta at some point in the future. We were able to sell quite a few copies of the Ghostly Encounters book, and I was able to meet a lot of really cool new folks within the paranormal community itself. It's been quite a few years since I've made public appearances, and I want to thank everybody I met during the course of the day. It was also great to catch up with a few old friends that I hadn't seen for quite some time. This includes Scott Sukkel, who spent quite a few years leading tours at the Ohio State Reformatory. Hell, Scott was running OSR ghost hunts when we first started as a team. I wish I could have heard his presentation, but I was chained to my table at the time it started. I'm sure it was great. I also want to give a shout out to the Haunted Hills Paranormal Society, Pursuit of the Paranormal, and SRI for stopping by our table to talk. I tried my best to be upfront with everybody that I met, and despite my 10 years in the field, I'm still quite the skeptic of paranormal devices and theories, so I know a few people were a little confused or shocked by some of my viewpoints, but I have to stay true to my beliefs. This includes my views on unproven technology, theories, psychics, etc. I honestly don't want to offend anyone, but I literally can't justify the existence of an unknown with unknown methods. If seemingly something works for you, have at it. However, don't be surprised if I respectfully question your methods or how you came to your conclusions. The last thing I want to do is discourage somebody from having an interest in the paranormal field, but I will be the first person to tell you to question it as much as possible. I also had a few people asking if our team is currently recruiting. Unfortunately, at this time, the answer is no. This may change in the future, but Mike and I are planning on keeping the team small at this time for several reasons. This isn't a knock on any of our past members or affiliates, seriously, but we do feel that running a smaller ship will be more efficient for this incarnation of the team. We also don't have as much free time as we did back in the day, so we plan to take on less investigations than in prior years. However, this will also give us more time to research each case that comes our way, which a lot of times is often more important than the investigation itself. I also wouldn't be surprised if we do contact a few of our old team members and bring them back in for special investigations from time to time. Once again, thank you to the Hidden Marietta team and the staff at the Lafayette Hotel. Hopefully we will see you all again in the near future. Before we begin, if you haven't already, please remember to subscribe to the CBus Paranormal Paracast on your favorite podcasting platforms. This will help you receive notifications from our podcast feed and will also help alert you when new episodes are available. The Paracast can currently be accessed through several of the top podcasting apps, such as Apple iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, and many more. We also have set up a Patreon account. Do you want extra content, behind-the-scenes footage, early listening access, or even ad-free episodes? You can help the show by making a small monthly donation for additional content. Visit the show's Patreon page for details, and remember, you can cancel at any time. Let's start off today with a few less controversial devices that nearly every paranormal investigator has: DVRs, camcorders, and cameras. I'll start off with one of my signature quotes that I've used a lot over the years. Taking a picture is like taking a sentence out of a novel. You won't be able to know the entire story of what you're looking at with such a limited piece of information. Why would you want to focus on a single moment of time when you can document everything before, during, and after it? And that's why I prefer camcorders over cameras. Camcorders and video feeds in general are a pivotal part of an investigator's toolkit. In my opinion, it's the most effective way to document your experiences and also to know where your team members are at all times. This is extremely beneficial if you have a large team. I'm personally not a fan of large groups of people while investigating, due to all the noise contamination and other complications. However, if you choose to run with a lot of people, video feeds are rather vital to your investigation. There are currently a plethora of video recording options these days, such as DVR systems, camcorders, and even GoPros. Every team seems to have their own preference to what types of video they like to use. Our team is still fairly old school on this, and we use a modern wired 8-channel DVR system for our cases. We use a wired system as they seem to generally be more reliable than our wireless counterparts. You also won't have to worry about internet connection problems screwing up your video feed during an investigation. Running cable all over a location can be tedious at times, but it's also an efficient way to cover as much ground as possible. Some teams might bypass a DVR system for camcorders, and that's perfectly fine. Just keep in mind that you'll be uploading a lot more files when it comes time to review your evidence. A DVR system will allow you to review more than one camera at once, which is also a nice feature to have. We will typically use handheld camcorders in addition to our DVR system to try to cover as much ground as possible. Most investigators usually prefer to work with infrared night vision cameras and camcorders. While most DVRs are already equipped with this, it might be more of a challenge to locate a nice reliable handheld infrared camera or camcorder. Take your time in trying to find a device that works for you. Research the device you're looking to buy and also read the reviews. There are a lot of nice camcorders and cameras out there, and at the same time there's also a lot of junk on the market as well. Choose wisely. I would also strongly recommend investing in high-grade illuminator lights. Illuminators will help your field of vision and also to help the camera see better within the darkness. I would also recommend trying to find a camcorder with the best resolution video that you can afford. This will give you better video quality when you're recording and reviewing your team's possible evidence. While night vision is nice, regular camcorders will also do the trick if you're in a pinch. Just make sure that you have sufficient lighting while investigating. Some video is better than no video at all. Some investigators also still prefer to use full-spectrum cameras. I've noticed that full-spectrum cameras are starting to lose popularity amongst the paranormal community. For those that are unaware, full-spectrum cameras and camcorders are cameras that are modified to show more light from the infrared spectrum. Actually nearly double the amount of light. Unfortunately, the devices are also extremely sensitive to motion while attempting to take photos and video, and this can cause quite a bit of motion blurs and false positives to untrained users. The cameras are fun to use in the hands of professional photographers, but they're really not necessary from a ghost hunting perspective in my opinion for collecting evidence. In conclusion, I would argue that video is possibly the most important tool that you can have during an investigation. While possible video evidence itself is rare, you're going to want to be prepared to record your experience when something happens, for your own reference and others if you choose to share your possible evidence with the paranormal community and supporters. Laser grids. Because all good ghouls appreciate a laser light show, right? Paranormal teams will generally use a laser grid in an environment where they believe a spirit or shadow figure may manifest or cross through. The device's usefulness is based on the belief that a ghost or entity can be seen or detected if it passes through the laser's light beams. In this case, investigators are assuming that entities can present themselves in a solid form, or at least manifest into something solid enough to be able to block out the grid's light matrix. Nearly every team I've seen over the years use the popular and cheap laser pen for their laser grid. They'll use a clamp to hold the button down in the on position as the device doesn't have an on and off button itself. The problem with this is that the pen itself isn't meant to run for long periods of time. Once it heats up, the diodes inside will start burning out and start giving false positives in the grid itself. I've teamed with a few teams over the years that'll leave these on for entire investigations, and by the night's end, 2/3 of their grid has faded into nothingness. They do make laser pointers with cooling fans, but I rarely see them being used. There are also newer laser grids that are built to run for longer periods of time. I'll give a special shout out to our friend Shelley, who conquered this problem by using a green Christmas laser light dot matrix that people put on their house during the holidays. Ironically, the device actually does have a cooling fan, and I thought that idea was pretty innovative at the time I seen it. Sometimes you just have to think outside of the box and find other ways to affordably upgrade your equipment. Unfortunately, investigators also tend to forget that we don't live in a vacuum or controlled space. We live in an atmosphere that is constantly in a state of flux. Dust particles and other matter can interact with the laser lights and can reflect back into the camera and give false positives. In turn, it might seem that something is crossing in front of the grid or even appearing to make a few dots disappear at a time, when in all reality, there's a natural explanation for it. I am personally becoming a fan of the newer updated grids that seem to shy away from the old dot matrix. Our team is currently testing a newer style grid that uses a square pattern as opposed to dots. So far, the new device seems to generally be more reliable than the old laser pen setup, and I feel that getting away from the old dot matrix will add a little bit more credibility to what investigators are attempting to accomplish with this method. While the laser grid isn't perfect, it does look like a device that can be improved on with time. Our next piece of equipment used to be the most expensive item in a ghost hunter's equipment case, the thermal imager. I'm still traumatized by how much I paid for ours back in the day. Thermal imagers are rather unique when you think about it. Nobody knows what ghosts are made of, or if they even exist for that matter. I find it rather odd that most investigators don't think about the thermal imager's main function, to detect surface heat. This means that the object they're looking for has to be a solid mass or something capable of leaving traces of heat from past heat signatures. This includes handprints, footprints, etc. So for the investigators out there, I ask you, are ghosts made out of a solid matter, or are they a translucent-like material that makes this device completely useless for detecting them? I guess that depends on your team's opinion of the matter. Most of the thermal evidence I've seen claimed by investigators usually show in the heated thermal spectrum, which means the entity in question will appear to be giving off a heat source. So why would we also state or believe that cold spots are a sign of activity in often rough and drafty locations? Do entities give off heat, or do they give off a cold, damp feeling? It seems a bit contradictory when you think of it in that way. What about all those supposed smoky apparitions caught in cemeteries over the years? If you've claimed those types of photos as evidence, you better not be using a thermal imager as well. Thermal imagers are used by firefighters to see through smoke, So that pretty much kills the idea of it capturing any substance or figure that is based out of a vapor or smoke-like material. Yep, I said it. Think about it. While the thermal imager likely can't detect ghosts, it does have some strong points and uses if you use it for what it's actually made for. Thermal imagers can tell if certain electrical items are recently turned off or currently on. I would use a light ballast as an example of this. You can use the thermal imager to see if the ballast is still hot from it recently being turned on. Even if the light itself might be off, it could still be holding power and interfering with your EMF detectors on the floor above it. Thermal imagers can also help you detect animals that might be on the property. I remember being at Thornhaven Manor in Indiana and the owner of the property thinking he heard growls during our stay. I already knew the growls couldn't have been supernatural in nature, and I pulled the thermal imager out and I found that he had 3 feisty raccoons in his walls. I would also recommend this device for security reasons. God forbid an individual waltz into a property that you're investigating. You should be able to detect them fairly easily. Thankfully for investigators, thermal imagers are much cheaper in this day and age. Just make sure that you use the device for its strengths and beware of glass reflections. I can't tell you how many images I've seen over the years of investigators capturing their own teammates' heat signature during an investigation, thinking it was something supernatural. You can usually tell how aware an investigator is of their devices if you confront them about their evidence, and then start asking them about possible reflections. They will either give you details on how they disproved it as a reflection, or they will look at you dumbfounded and in denial. Unfortunately, I've usually found it's the latter. Overall, the thermal imager does have its advantages when it's used correctly. And that brings us to the final device today, the SLS Camera. Yeah, you know, the device that makes those funky dancing skeleton figures. The SLS camera has been popping up in a lot of investigators' equipment kits as of late, but I don't think teams are really researching the capabilities of this device. It's another piece of equipment that started popping up after it was shown on television. I believe Bill Chappell debuted it on an old episode of Ghost Adventures, and it's been used fairly heavily since. It's also important to note that the device didn't really become popular in the ghost hunting community until it appeared on the Paranormal Activity movies. I find it ironic that so many devices seem to follow a similar path. The Kinect sensor was originally created by Microsoft for their gaming systems, but it was discontinued a few years later. The sensor uses infrared light to detect body movement, and it creates a 3D gaming environment from what it sees, or attempts to see in many cases. In essence, the sensor tries to put a skeleton figure on anything in the environment that it's detecting that appears to have human form. The sensor will constantly try to scan the environment looking for human characteristics. In turn, the device will often mistake random items in the environment as having human characteristics, such as furniture, chairs, vacuums, and other various debris. The Kinect itself has been used on investigations for a few years now, and I've seen it misused several times on television and during investigations. Flaws in the device's software are notorious for giving false positives. To make matters worse, the device is supposed to be used on a stable surface and in a clean gaming area. Naturally, paranormal teams have ignored these instructions and have started making the SLS camera handheld and mobile, which makes it even harder for the camera sensor to try to make sense of what it's actually scanning in the environment. Infrared lights from cameras and illuminators will also interfere with the device's reading ability, which basically covers about everything in the investigator's equipment kit. Yeah. If you test out one of these cameras or watch one of the shows on television, you will always notice that the skeleton is usually stationary with its limbs flailing around. It's because the sensor's detected something in the environment, and it's trying to process it. The skeleton will never move from that position, unless the sensor focuses on another object in the environment. Show me a skeletal figure that moves across the screen side to side or front to back, and then you might actually have something interesting. Spoiler, it never happens. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if your team is using one of these cameras and presenting your findings as evidence, you're not doing your job correctly. especially if you claim to get evidence every time you pull one of these out for an investigation. This is why it's critically important to test your gear out in the field before making outlandish claims. Eventually the truth does come out. In conclusion, I don't feel the SLS camera is an important or needed device in the paranormal community. Warn others and avoid it at all costs. Save your money and spend it elsewhere. Hey, you. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? I can tell you firsthand that starting a podcast has been a fun and rewarding experience. However, the process can feel overwhelming if you don't know how to get started. That is where Buzzsprout comes in. In fact, it's so good that they've already helped over 100,000 people start their own podcast. Buzzsprout will help you get your podcast onto every major podcasting platform, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. You will also get a professional website and audio players to share on other websites, detailed analytics, and other tools to help you promote your episodes. Buzzsprout also publishes tutorials, blog posts, and YouTube videos every week to help you get started. To launch your own podcast and to collect your $20 Amazon gift card for signing up with a paid account, click the link in our show notes on this media player's information panel. This will help support our show, and it will also help Buzzsprout know that we sent you. Buzzsprout, the easiest way to start a podcast. This episode was also brought to you by our good friend Spencer Shepard at B&B Concrete in Shelby, Ohio. He has some amazing stone pieces for your lawn and garden, such as Sasquatches, gargoyles, bird bass, and even dragons. Be the coolest person on your block and visit facebook.com/bnbconcreteman or email bnbconcreteman@gmail.com for more information. Alright, it's that time of the show where I read a question from one of our listeners. I was actually asked this question in person the other day, and I suppose I should let her stay anonymous. Thanks, Amy. The question I was asked was, how do you feel about dowsing rods being used in paranormal research? Naturally, I had to give a jokingly wise-ass answer of, why would you want to detect water while you're ghost hunting at a location? As you guys know, I'm a skeptic. I felt this question came at a great time, and I figured it'd fit on this episode rather well. I'm personally not a fan of dowsing rods. I don't like or believe in anything that the user has some sort of control or manipulation over. This is either consciously or subconsciously. I made a statement on the first episode that the paranormal field hasn't evolved very much over the years. Teams seem to rely on the same passed down techniques, stories, and theories from generations that are long gone. I think dowsing rods are a perfect example of what I was stating. How many years of dowsing rods have been used now? We're talking at least 16th century. The paranormal paranoia started shortly after, when they were declared to be superstitious or even satanic by some individuals and cultures. Ironically, they were even used in France for tracking down criminals and heretics. That is, until they eventually realized how flawed the rods and the users were. Whoops. Countless times over history, individuals have used these rods have claimed that they were able to do something with them that they simply weren't capable of. This includes their use in communicating with the dead. Let's be serious here. When have they ever, without a shadow of a doubt, proven that ghosts exist? In all this time? They haven't. So why are individuals still using them? In my opinion, we're just repeating a cycle of confusion and nonsense. You can give them handles, racing stripes, hell, you can make them neon colors for ridiculous prices. And in the end, they will still give the same inconclusive results. In my opinion, it's time to move on to something else, folks. We need new and better ideas. And no, this doesn't mean we need to look to cheaply made motion-censored cat toys that people are now using. I honestly can't believe I have to say this in this day and age. But yes, it's become a thing. Well, we've reached the end of another episode. I hope that everybody enjoyed our look into some of the most popular ghost hunting gadgets on the market. Our next episode will be our first location spotlight episode, and we'll be focusing on a location that I'm very familiar with, the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. Make sure to tune in as we'll be discussing the building's extensive history, our experiences, its infamous inmates, ghostly legends, and more. As always, you can reach out to us and submit questions to us on social media. The team is currently on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can also visit our official website at cbusparanormal.com. Once again, please remember to subscribe to the CBus Paranormal Paracast on your favorite podcasting platforms and devices. And I'll see you next month. Thank you once again for listening. Would you like to meet our team in person? Join us at the Parapsychon 3 on May 21st and May 22nd at the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. Our team will be there on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and on Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. For more information on how to get your tickets, or to see what celebrities will be involved with the event, make sure to visit their official website at parapsychon.com. We hope to see you there.